Well, welcome back to another great episode here at Table Talk TV. Today, we are going to be doing an autopsy of colleague and myself's interactions with J-Dubs. Stay tuned. Well, colleague, the autopsy, not the biopsy, but the autopsy. Is it autopsy? Autopsy? Autopsy.
Yeah.
The autopsy begins, Mr. Colleague. What have we seen now that it's dead, it's over? As we go back and examine our interactions, what comes to your mind?
Well, the JWs, of course.
This is elder speak.
Yes.
Wow. Who can interpret this? These are the tongues of elders.
That was Einstein. That was Hitler.
Wow. Burton Russell.
That was the gift of tongues. And I don't have that, and I can't interpret that either. I don't have the gift of interpreting tongues either.
We have to call on the angel of truth.
Not Moroni, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I got to say, it is kind of weird how our videos on the Mormons aren't getting a lot of attention, but our videos on the JWs are. And it's awfully coincidental also that there's a new docuseries out called American Primeval. It seems pretty good. It's just like Under the Banner of Heaven, which is another one. And these are on Mormon history and Mormon beliefs. They still don't have any for the J-Dubs, and I don't really know why that is. And again, I looked again for a long time today and last night for any kind of JW stuff online, like equivalent to the Mormon stuff. And there isn't any. Everything you find online is ex-JWs. So I don't know if it's because they specifically don't want to adapt to technology still, and they're still not willing to loosen up. The Mormons have, and they're still doing somewhat fine. But the J-Dubs are still not willing to adapt, I guess. But
well, the only thing that come to my mind is with the Mormons, you see a lot of off breaks. Like you see, there's, I guess, fundamental Mormons, and then you have more liberal Mormons. You have the Gen Z Mormons, and so there's like this diversity where there may be some marketing, because of course, if there's like Netflix and other things, who will be watching this? Who will see this? And it's probably people who are going to, if they're Mormons, they're going to be more liberal, or Gen Zs, younger people who are going to be maybe more fluid in asking those questions. But yeah, I just don't see that with the Jehovah's Witnesses. It doesn't seem like there's this diversity. There isn't like we're fundamental Jehovah's Witnesses and we're liberal Jehovah's Witnesses. It's just like you submit to Bethel, you submit to the fundamentals of Kingdom Hall. This is it. And that may be the thing. It's like there isn't a market, because you know these people who make these documentaries are usually like Netflix and stuff. They're trying to make money, and clearly you need people to watch it.
I just don't know why they're not doing it for the J-Dubs.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is maybe they just done enough back study to realize that there's just not enough people who will be enticed by that kind of rhetoric comparative to the Mormons, because there is a widespread of diversity amongst types of Mormons. I haven't really heard of like these different types of Jehovah's Witnesses, and that might be the reason. They just, like you're saying, they just aren't modernizing or diversifying enough to expand the justification to spend millions of dollars on a documentary.
Yeah, it's either that, option one, or option two, Netflix is beginning to realize that J-Dubs are true.
Oh, they are Jehovah Witnesses?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But we know there's a lot of celebrities who were.
That's true. Yeah, like Michael Jackson, he's a famous guy. He's probably one of the most famous Jehovah Witnesses, but even those who are famous tend to they tend to really put a segregation on the face front. Like when you see them, it's almost like they separate their public life and private life. Like they're devout Jehovah Witnesses, but they don't try to intertwine it too much. But with the Mormons, it's like they integrate it in everything. And yet they are still some that are diverse. So there seems to be probably more profitability in making Mormon documentaries than Jehovah Witnesses. It's the only thing I can think of because, there shouldn't really be any other reason.
Well, a third possible reason for it is the Mormons were a lot more wild than the J-Dubs. Mm-hmm. Like Mormons actually were blatantly racist at one point, blatantly sexist. They had polygamy, and they were actually acting on these beliefs as well. And this is what they're actually known for. I know as much as they try to erase the past. I had a friend of mine recently tell me that Mormons don't even like being called Mormons anymore because it's got a bad name. So they're going to try to move towards LDS. I don't know if that's true, but people in the comment section can fact check it. But Mormons are just trying to become more inclusive, I think.
If I got Jesus, I've got all.
If you got Jesus, you can come as you are. You can look like, it doesn't matter what you look like.
Well, on to the autopsy of our interactions. In your interactions
with the J-Dubs.
Yeah. Is there anything within that interaction that kind of explains or shows an example of why they are so different than the Mormons in presentation? Because I know with my interactions, the Mormons are trying to be more inclusive. They're trying to be more, even the missionaries that they come to do their mission work, where they come to the doors and all that. Their presentation, their attitude, their actions are not just apologetic. They're not sitting here trying to convert you to Mormonism as much as, like, the end statements with Mormons are usually, well, you just got to pray to Joseph Smith. And it's the inclusiveness of, we have a good community, we have a good family, all the benefits is tied into the thing. It's not so much, here's what the scriptures say, here's what this is. It's not an apologetical conversation with the Mormons. But when I have my interactions with the Dubs, the J-Dubs, they're swole. Like, it's all apologetics. And, you can respect that because it's not trying to sell you on the benefits. But at some point they do, because that's the Watchtower agenda.
Yeah, they're not stupid. They know a lot more history than most Christians do, the J-Dubs.
Yeah. And so when I talk to them, it always reverts back to at some point. And so, of course, at the end, everybody's going back to fire insurance. Everybody's going back to the benefits. So, yeah, at the end, the J-Dubs is, but it's coming. The end is coming. And what are you going to do?
Well, none of them believe in hell. So, yeah, I mean, I've actually used that as one of mine. Like, if there's no hell, then who cares? And JW specifically told me, well, don't you want to be with your family? And I was like, no, not really. And they're like, well, you don't want to live forever? And I was like, no, I think I would like to rest in peace. Honestly, that'd be nice. And they didn't know I was a Christian. I didn't tell them nothing. I'm just playing ignorance, which is what I do with anybody, with Catholics, Mormons, or J-Dubs, or Muslims, or anybody who has a different belief than me. I just play ignorant. And a lot of times I am ignorant. So I just let them tell me what they actually believe. Because each individual, they have their Watchtower society, their head bishop or their prophet or whatever. But then they also have their own personal internal convictions. And that's what I really want, is their personal convictions. So tell me what you believe, and let's just talk about it. Maybe you can convince me. And so when I started this specific JW, he was telling me that, I'm just going to be annihilated. And I was like, okay, well then what's the problem with that? And I was like, and I could literally be the most evil person on the planet. I could be Hitler, Mao, or Genghis, or anybody. And I'm still going to be in the same place. So it doesn't matter how evil I am. I could actually do a lot of bad things right now to you, and I'm still just going to go to rest in peace in the end. So who really cares? And he was like, well, I guess if I can't convince you, I guess there's nothing left to say. And I was like, oh, I guess, yeah. I mean, now I was like, I know the Baptist church down the road will tell me that there's hell to pay if I don't follow them, but you're not promising anything like that, are you? And again, the guy was like, well, no. And I was like, okay, well then who cares? I'll go my way and you go your way. Because in the end, literally, there's really no motivation. So that was a interesting interaction. But the two most productive interactions I've had with the JWs personally is, one, asking them why I need Jesus. What is the reason I need Jesus? And I've had them get mad at me before by asking, because it's such a simple question, so when I asked that to a couple of JWs, what do I need Jesus for? They said, well, he's a good example. And to which I responded, well, if he's a good example, I don't really need him today. And in fact, we could probably find a lot of good examples in history. And even today, I was like, you guys are probably good examples, right? And the man and his wife was like, well, yeah, but we're not perfect. And I was like, okay, so I just, the parts you mess up on, I can look at Jesus' life, whatever, but I don't really need him though. Like I need his biography, I guess, but I don't really need him specifically. And this is when they started getting really mad because there's really no answer. Like, what do you need Jesus for? I've had the same encounter with Mormons and Roman Catholics as well, because they both also claim that you need Jesus. But when you ask them, what do I need Jesus for? They have the same answers. Mormons probably gave the best answers for it, but still, they actually said that Jesus was a miracle worker, so you need him for that. And I was like, yeah, but, we can't produce miracles. So if I accept Jesus into my heart right now, he's not going to let me do miracles, right? And they were like, well, no. And I was like, okay, so again, why do I need Jesus? Because you're trying to give me Jesus. You're telling me I need him. What do I need him for? And then these are the Mormons. These are not the JWs. The JWs don't go that far into it, but the Mormons did, surprisingly. The next thing they said was, well, again, he's a good life example. And I was like, again, I could just accept you guys into my home. You guys can teach me how to be a good person. A good friend, a good person could teach me how to be a good person. I don't really need Jesus. What do I need to accept Jesus right now for? And they're like, well, what about, have you read Isaiah? And I was like, maybe once or twice. I don't know. So they took me to Isaiah where it says that he was bruised for our transgressions. And I was like, okay, but we still have to be bruised for our transgressions too, right? Like, he was perfect and that's good, but it doesn't mean anything because we also still have to be perfect to make it into your heavenly celestial kingdom, right? And they're like, well, yeah. I was like, okay, so again, who cares if he was perfect or not? It makes no difference because I still have to be perfect. It makes no difference. So he was bruised for his transgressions, and that's great, but I also have to be bruised. So it makes no difference at all. I still don't need him. What do I need Jesus for? And eventually they exhausted all their questions. And I told them too, I was like, you guys are painting this Jesus character as this huge savior and that we all need him. I'm still trying to figure out. And I was like, now I can go. Again, they think I'm an agnostic. They don't know what I believe. I'm like, I can go to the Baptist street down the road and they'll tell me why I need Jesus because I'm going to go to hell if I don't have him because he was perfect and I'm not. They'll tell me these things and I know that. And that makes sense because their Jesus is huge and they at least have ideas and claims to back that huge Jesus paradigm. You guys are saying your Jesus is huge and we all need him, but you're not really telling anybody what we need him for. So when you can tell me why I need Jesus, then maybe I'll accept him. But until now, I'd rather accept the Baptist Jesus down the road. And again, same conversations with Roman Catholics. Same thing, though. Again, with them, it's like, I don't need Jesus to pray to him because I've, Saint Joseph, I have Saint Josephine, Saint Mary, Saint all these saints I can pray to and actually should pray to. Mary is the one who justifies me before Jesus according to their catechism. So it's like, what, again, the same questions, and they have no answers. And eventually it's just, you really don't need Jesus in any of these ideas. And I'm not saying Baptists are the only ones that are saying you need Jesus and actually can back that up. I know, that's just one denomination that everybody's familiar with. That's why I pick it. But anyway, I don't know if you have any thoughts, host. I've been talking for a while. Those are just my personal interactions with these kind of groups.
Yeah, I've had the same kind of conversations. The dialogue is probably a little different, but yeah, I've asked them why Jesus is important for me, because they don't, with me, they never really say you need to accept Jesus. And they say you need him. And so, yeah, the same question is what do I need him for? And the most prevalent response has been, without Jesus, the acceptance of him allows the ability to perform and function as a good witness to Jehovah. Without accepting him, you don't have the Holy Spirit and the ability to be the witness of Jehovah. To get that spirit and unction and conviction to be the witness you can be, to function in the path that Jesus shown as the example, you have to accept Jehovah's witness. And his chief witness is Jesus Christ. And if you don't accept his chief witness, then you won't be able to have the spirit and the conviction and the unction and the path to walk as a good witness of Jehovah. And I said, okay, well, that's fair enough. So it's something like, if I want to get a job, if I don't accept what the CEO is presenting, even though he's not the owner of the company, but he's the representative, the chief representative of the company. Of course, the shareholders and the executive board, they're the full owners, but not in totality. But we'll just say they are the Jehovah in this idea. But the CEO is the chief spokesman and example of the company. If I don't accept his mantra and his ways and his examples, then I won't be able to be a participant in this company, even though I am still responsible to be my own representative of this company. And they would assert, yeah, something like that. And that would probably be the best response I've heard from the Jehovah's Witnesses. The reason you need Jesus is so that you can be empowered by the Spirit and you can accept him as Jehovah, saying, this is my chief witness. And if you don't accept that, then you're denying Jehovah's example to the world. And then the only thing you have left is do your example. But now you're trying to say, I can be greater or I can supersede Jehovah's chief witness. Because if you don't accept him, the only thing is left that you can be the chief witness.
Yeah, but see, and they'll play these word games. No, some of them will even tell you, we don't believe in works-based salvation. Some of them will admit it, some of them won't. Again, this is just across the board, Catholics, Mormons, and J-Dubs. And we're not bringing Muslims and all these other people because they don't claim Jesus. They don't make the claim that you need Jesus for anything. So I'm just attacking these three. We could even throw Seventh-day Adventists. I've talked with them too. We can throw Church of Christ in there. All these people suffer from the same problem. Because Church of Christ will say you need to be baptized to be saved. So yes, you need Jesus, but you also need to be baptized. You need two things. And they all do this. Jehovah's Witnesses say the same thing. You need Jesus, but you need all these other works. Mormons, same thing. You need Jesus, but you need all these other works. Catholics, you need Jesus, but you need all these works. Seventh-day Adventists will tell you that you actually are receiving the mark of the beast if you're going to church on Sunday. So if you are going to church on Sunday, because the Roman Catholics are the beast, and the Roman Catholics, in their view, this is not historical. It's what do they call that? And anachronistic, ahistorical, anachronistic. I can't remember the exact term. Anyway, they know history, but they know just enough to be dangerous because they fabricate a lot of stuff. So they say that because Rome is the beast, they changed Saturday to Sunday. So anybody who worships with their hand or their forehead on Sunday, they worship God on Sunday with their hand and their head, their forehead, knowing and believing with their hands, doing. then you are participating, you are actually receiving the mark of this Roman Catholic beast. So you're going to hell if you are worshiping on Sunday. So again, you need Jesus and you need to go to church on Saturday if you are a Seventh-day Adventist. So I would, and I have actually asked all these different groups the same exact question. What do you need Jesus for? Because in the end, he can't save you. He cannot save you. For Roman Catholics, if you commit a venial sin, Jesus can't save you from that. Or Mary can't save you either. Now, if you commit mortal sins, it's like, who cares? Because I can just have another chance at it in purgatory. You just get to live life basically all over again. So it's a win-win for them. It's like, basically, unless you commit a venial sin, everybody's getting in. So eventually, of course. But it's the same thing. It's the same rhetoric. You need Jesus, but you actually really need this other stuff.
Yeah, a lot of times when we go down these roads, it's not so much, they don't like, when I've had conversations with them, they don't like so much using, when I bring up, it's a works-based salvation, it's not like they deny it, but that's not the way they want to see it, even though so in that conversation, that linear conversation I just explained that I had, them explain that's why I need Jesus, is because you're denying Jehovah's chief witness. The platform still ends up me asking then, so Jesus himself doesn't save. And they don't really say no, but what they explain, at least in my conversations, is Jesus is the savior of the world because he's the one that Jehovah brought as the demonstration of how to be a witness for Jehovah. So that is how he saves us, by being the perfect witness. Now, of course, we have to mimic that perfect witness. And our salvation is a byproduct of accepting the chief witness. And how do we accept him? By following his example. But yes, we are responsible on how we format that witness. Like, some people are better witnesses than others. And so therefore there are these layers of the end goal, the end time, the apocalypse, this whole agenda for the Watchtower movement. And so then at the end of all of that, then I have to conclude again. So it is then a works-based system. My end goal is predicated on my accomplishment of being how close of a witness I am to the chief witness, then Jesus Christ. So there is no direct correlation between Christ's life, atonement, and all of that for me. He's just showing me that I will have to do the same things. So therefore, I can achieve a higher level of end game or reward.
Well, ultimately, that's why I'm asking them this, because I'm trying to show them the disconnect. And if they can see the disconnect, then maybe they will try to fix it.
Yeah, and I would assume so. But if somebody accepts works-based stuff, and I understand why, because that's how the world, our normal living, our material world is presented, at least in a capitalistic society. You work, based upon your work, you get paid based upon the quality of work. You work better, you work harder, you're more innovative, then you get paid more.
Based on merit.
Right. That's capitalism, right?
Yeah,
We're not communists. Communism is no classes, everybody's equal, doesn't matter. And there's just this authoritarian government making sure that the weakest link gets abrogated so that everybody doesn't get lazy. But in capitalism, it's a free system. Oh, you want to be homeless? Fine, but you ain't get nothing. If you want to work really hard, then you have the ability to get more. But yeah, it's based on you and your merit. And still, in capitalism, it's kind of like the same thing. There are examples, chief witnesses. There's examples. Oh, you see Elon Musk, you see Jeff Bezos, and these are like gods in this analogy that those are the guys you're never going to, and everybody knows, you're never going to really be the Elon Musk. You're never going to become Jeff Bezos or any of these people or Larry Ellison. But then the idea is they preach capitalism. But if you follow their footsteps and you try to be just like these witnesses, you can have a better outcome, a better end game, and maybe you can be like one of them. And that's that's the analogy I usually try to present when I talk to them. Is like, it just sounds like you guys have religified, if we can say that, capitalism. That's all it sounds like. And so it's just like a financial system for religion, a religious financial system, like an integration. And if that's the case, then I'm already practicing this idea just by participating in the United States financial system, because we already have our chief witnesses. And then they'll say, but there's an afterlife after it's all over. I said, so we got to do both then. We got to do the worldly financial system of merit, and then we got to do Christ's financial or spiritual merit game. But it's really not about Jesus Christ. He's just telling us this is how you can be. If you work really hard and you try really hard, it's fantasy. You'll never be Elon Musk, but you might be able to get somewhere.
Well, it's funny, you talk to Catholics too. They'll tell you it's all through grace. We believe in grace and we believe in all that, until you ask them about their own Council of Trent. Their own Council of Trent says if anybody tells you that you're saved through faith in Christ alone, let them be anathema. And a lot of people are ignorant of that. A lot of Catholics are ignorant of that. So they honestly believe that they're just like Protestants with this idea of grace. And again, you don't need to go into all this stuff. They're not going to remember all these councils and terms and dates. But again, that's why I just try to simplify. It's like, well, what do you need Jesus for? And if you really are just like me, because they all say that they're Christian. Catholics will say they're Christian. Mormons claim to be Christian. Jehovah's Witnesses claim they're Christian. And last time I had a JW tell me, yeah, we're Christian just like you. I was like, oh, good. So there's nothing to talk about. And they're like, well, we have difference of beliefs. I was like, yeah, but look, we're both Christian. And we're both getting in. Who cares? And they're like, well, no, well, but we believe different. Yeah, so does every denomination, right? So who cares? Look, we're brothers, remember? We're Christians. And then that's when they start denying. It's like, well, I don't know. Well, you guys are straight from the faith. It's like, okay, so we're apostates. So we're not Christians like each other. You believe we're unbelievers, and you guys are the real believers. But don't play this game, because they all play these games. And that's what, the enemy is very good at playing these games, these mind games. Look, we're just like you. It's like, oh, well, then there's nothing to talk about. If that's real, if you really believe that. But of course, they want to sell you something. So there's just a tactic.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, that's where it comes down to, I think, is if you're looking for something that you think you can present to God, like, and specifically for the Jehovah Witnesses, like if you stood before Jehovah and he examined you as a witness, do you believe your merit would qualify before God? Are you willing to bet on that? Because the gamble is your layers of the end game, the apocalyptic reward, is based upon what Jehovah deems your qualifying witness as. But one thing they will get, because they don't believe in hell, so they believe in annihilation. At least they're promised one thing: they won't be annihilated. And a lot of people make that example. I'd rather be a janitor in heaven than, a king in hell.
Unless you're just going to rest in peace.
Right. Well, but they would say annihilation are for those who deny that Christ is Jehovah's chief witness, and you haven't accepted that. And so at least they would say, at least I'll get that. But then again, if you're going to take the peasant road, like in capitalism, you want to be homeless. Because you can do that in capitalism. That's fine. It's your choice. It'd be the same thing. It's like if you want to be a bad Jehovah Witness, you want to accept Christ as a chief witness, you want to accept that Christ is Jehovah's chief witness, and so you want to follow this Jehovah Witness road, but you just want to be homeless. You just want to be like the peasant Jehovah Witness. Why? You're going to live worldly anyway. You're already doing all of that. So it's literally like you're just taking for granted the idea, I don't want to be annihilated. So that's it. So it's just like you're just doing a free ride anyway. Because the only thing you're going to get in the end is janitor service. It's like if you want to really believe this in works-based merit systems, the objective, just like capitalism, is you want to move up the ladder. If you're not wanting to move up the ladder, that means you really don't believe in your merit. You don't believe in yourself enough. That's why you say, I'm just going to be homeless. You don't think like homeless people, they have this point of where they think, I have no more to offer. I have nothing to give. My life is shattered. I can't do anything. They give up. It'd be the same thing. It's like, why are you even Jehovah's Witness then? If you're not trying to be the best Jehovah's Witness you can be, you're just robbing the free ride.
Yeah, at least a homeless person, it's not like they can just easily transfer to a different country. But yeah, a Jehovah's Witness could easily transfer to a different religion.
Yeah. And then there are different opportunities. But if you go into Protestantism, it's not merit-based. Now, I'm kind of hesitant to go down this road because it gets more into semantics of the theological proposition of sanctification, because if even in Protestantism, when it gets too radical in sanctification, it almost sounds like works-based salvation too, because based upon your sanctification, you have church qualifications. Like maybe you're not a real brother, maybe you're not a real believer if you don't do X, Y, Z. And so instead of going, I don't want to go too far down that road because that's a slippery slope too, but at least Protestants will affirm with their mouth, it's not because of my merit. It's because of Christ and his atonement. And it was good enough for me. And no matter how wicked I am at the end, like with Luther, seeing himself as no matter how hard I try, I still see myself wicked and short. Christ's grace is sufficient, not so that I can do better, but so that I can have a place in his kingdom. I can have eternal life with him. That's what it's sufficient for. Now, the outworkings of sanctification, that's person to person, but that doesn't qualify in a Protestant's mind your ability to have a home that Christ said he has prepared for you. And that's where the real end thing is when I talk to the Jehovah's Witnesses is, do you really believe in your merit? And do you think it's fair propagating this to your congregants? Because you know there are people who are like homeless Jehovah's Witnesses. But you're over here standing on a pedestal saying, well, at least I'm not. I said, that kind of massive class system, is that really what you think Christ was trying to propagate? When you saw Christ and him walking and talking with his disciples, was he really preaching a class system? He's better and you guys are better? Or did you hear the disciples bickering about class systems and Jesus saying, it's not first, last, first seat, my kingdom, great person, last. He's propagating, we have a greater thing, a unifying thing. The thing that I came to do, that we want to share, that I will send, my spirit. It's not about who's the best Christian, who's the worst Christian. But in Jehovah's Witnesses or any merit-based system, that's what you end up with. There are people on top of the pedestal because I have achieved CEO status. But you guys aren't. But that just reminds me what Jesus said that God was praying. The CEO on top of the hill was saying, I'm glad I'm not like old peasant man.
Yeah. Well, they don't believe that we have souls. So yeah, when you get into Protestants believe that we're at least dichotomous. We have a flesh and a soul. And there's some Protestants that are trichotomous with flesh, soul, and spirit, or body, soul, and spirit. But JWs don't believe in any of that, and that's where we get this idea, this distinction between justification and sanctification, at least in the Lutheran Reformed understanding. You have justification and sanctification. Your soul is justified, but your body is being sanctified. So there's this dance between the two, this war between the flesh and the spirit. But the JWs can't believe any of that. They don't believe you have a soul. Even Jesus was just a monocotomous person. He was spiritually Michael the Archangel in the Old Testament. And then when he came into flesh, he literally morphed into a physical being. He was not still a spiritual Michael and physically Jesus at the same time. He was only physically Jesus. And then when he went back out of his flesh nature, he went back into his spiritual nature. And yes, it's an age-old Gnostic idea that Jesus didn't actually rise again in flesh; he rose again in spirit. So he rose again in spirit, back into his Michael state, and therefore he was raised to the right hand of the Father, given a kingdom, and all that stuff. So even he didn't have this double nature. So this brings me to a whole nother paradigm. Another thing I've actually asked the JWs, and I've had a lot of productive conversations with many of them on this one issue. And this is something you guys can try next time they come knocking. You take them to John chapter 2, verse 21. I have it highlighted right here in yellow. This is the scene where, I'll just read this brief passage. Starting in verse 18, it says, "So then the Jewish leaders responded, 'What sign can you show us, since you are doing these things?' Jesus replied, 'Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up again. Then the Jewish leaders said to him, 'This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you're going to raise it up in 3 days?' But Jesus was speaking about the temple of his body. So after he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered what he had said when he said this, and they believed the scripture and the saying that Jesus had spoken." This is the NET translation for anybody interested. This is very confusing for them, because a temple, the very meaning and the very nature of every single temple in the entire planet, in the ancient world and even today, there's one use for a temple, one purpose. When you build a temple, it was the house of a god or a goddess. So you think of the temple of Artemis or the Egyptian temple of Ra. You can go anywhere. There was always a place for gods to dwell on earth, and that was their home. So if you want to go meet a god, if you want to go talk to Zeus in that world, you go to Zeus's temple. You can't just be in your home, in your closet, and pray to Zeus. You have to go to Zeus's temple to talk to him, to ask him for things, and pay homage. Same thing with any god. You have to go to their house and talk to them. It's just like a friend. If you want to talk to a friend, in this world, they didn't have, Facebook and cell phones. They had to go to the person's house physically and talk to them. That's how they talked to anybody, including the gods. And this is the whole purpose, that the god had a temple or a house. It was the house of a god or goddess. There's a whole purpose of it, because they were thought to have lived in space. A lot of these gods and goddesses lived in space. But they would come down from time to time to dwell in their temple, and that's when humans can come and talk with them and interact with them. Much of the way, like when a king would come and interact with his people, in person, in public, then everybody could come to him and talk to him. Otherwise, he's withdrawn into his king's quarters and nobody can contact him. So a temple has one purpose. It's the dwelling place of a god. Knowing this, and unfortunately, a lot of JWs are ignorant of that fact. So you simply ask them, what is the purpose of a temple? And you could even ask them before you take them to this passage. What is the purpose and function of a temple in the ancient world? We'll just stick to there. That way you don't play these modern games. Some of them told me, well, it was a dwelling place of a god. Some of them didn't know. They're like, it's a place of worship. It's a place of sacrifice or whatever. To which you then ask him, okay, if that's the case, why do you go there to worship? Why do you sacrifice? You bring your sacrifices there at the temple. Why do you do that and not somewhere else in the marketplace? Why don't you do it at home? And then it clicks in their head, because God's living there. So you go to worship God in his home. That's where you go interact with God. You go sacrifice to God in his home. You bring the sacrifices to his home, the temple. Once you get them to that understanding, then you bring them to this passage where Jesus says that his body is the temple. And he's speaking of the Jewish temple, which means the very Jewish God, Yahweh, is dwelling within inside of him. So let's say he's Michael the Archangel. So let me rewind just a second. When I brought one Jehovah's Witness, I brought this to this passage, he said, well, that can't be. That just can't be. Yahweh's not dwelling inside of Jesus. Jesus only had one nature. It was just flesh. He was Michael, but just flesh form of Michael. And I was like, then why did he claim to be the temple? Specifically the Jewish temple, the dwelling place of Yahweh. Why did he claim that? And they're like, this guy specifically was like, well, I don't know. I'll have to look into that. And then his buddy said, well, but doesn't Paul say that we are all the temple? And I was like, even better. So now we have some Yahweh dwelling inside of us. And he was like, well, that can't be. And I was like, then why did Paul say that? You think these ancient Jewish people, through that temple, that word temple, that specifically with reference to the Jewish temple, that's what they're talking about. These are Jews talking about their temple. They're not talking about the temple of Askepelos. They're talking about the Jewish temple. You think they just threw that around lightly? Oh, you're a temple. Hey, you're a temple. Hey, that rock over there, it's a temple. No, they were specific with this word temple. The Greek term here is naos. You can see, I'm not pulling the wool over your eyes. It's naos right here. Let's see if I can, there we go. So you can see right here, the correlation. Naos. And it literally says, this temple. That's the word for temple. So they have to deal with that. And a lot of JWs like to go into the Greek to try to figure out, well, does this word actually say temple? So it's something that is very interesting because we can play. Let's say, I asked him, even if Jesus was Michael, why couldn't he be the temple of Yahweh? So now Michael, the archangel, is the temple of Yahweh. Why can't you have that? Why can't you have it that way? And he said, it's just not true because we don't have souls. We don't have a dichotomous nature. We are monocotomous. I was like, so what do we do with these passages then? The passage that I brought up and then the passage that your buddy brought up from Paul. What do we do with these? Why are we called the temple? Are you guys temples? And then they both said, no, we are not. And then I asked, so who was Paul talking to then? So you're denying Jesus' body as a temple, which we just read. Even in your Watchtower translation, it says this. Even in the Greek Watchtower translation, it still says this. And Paul still says it as well. So this is something that is huge. Again, this means that Jesus is the dwelling place of Yahweh, that he is actually God. He has a flesh, which is human, or if you want to believe it's Michael, who cares? He's God. This is why the disciples worshipped at his feet, which they were not worshiping angels, if you look at Revelation. This destroys everything that they've been taught, that Jesus was God, Yahweh, in flesh. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
The only thing I could think that they might say is that the dwelling place is an analogous thing of being the example of worship, the example of the Jehovah. This is because it's true. That's what a temple was made for in the ancient times. It doesn't matter what religion you believed in. This is their home. This is the place you go meet this God. And so this would be where you would find the epitome of that God. I guess they could say that Jesus was analogizing himself as that's why as I walk, you can see God, because I am his chief witness of God, because his spirit dwells around me and he constantly is allowing his essence to manifest. So I am like a temple in this sense.
That Yahweh, the God, is actually dwelling inside you and therefore manifesting through you.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're going to have to do something with the word dwelling in. You're going to have to analogize that. Yeah, because if you take it literally, that means if you take it literally, it does show a dichotomous function, because there's you and then there's something dwelling in you.
They didn't even have to say that. The Jews, everybody in that ancient world, even in this world today, like the Hindus just built 3 new temples, and everybody knows what that means. They have 3 goddesses living in those temples. So they're living inside the temple. So the ancient readers and writers didn't have to say any more than we have to, that he's dwelling inside or he's working through or anything. As soon as you say something or someone is a temple, it begs the question of which God? Which God is dwelling inside of this temple, this house?
Regardless, you don't even have to say God. By saying temple or home or anything, the implicit reference is a home is not a home because it's not like a tree. A tree is its own thing. A home is actually a byproduct because it's a byproduct of something that needs it. Like, people need homes. Dogs need shelter. Temples need gods. that these buildings are byproducts of something that needs to fill it. It's not just its own essence, like a tree or a human or something. So if you use the connection between a human and dwelling, anything, you can call it the dwelling, you call it a temple, you can call it anything, that implies the fact that your body now is synonymous with something that needs to be dwelled with and something needs to be inside. And so that's what I'm saying. If you take it literally, that shows a dichotomous function. There's the exteriorness of the temple, and then the interior of the temple. Like I was saying, the only thing that I could think that they might be able to play with is saying that the dwelling in is an analogous of the external examples of being a witness.
I did have another JW. This one was over the phone. We would actually spend 2 to 3 hours every Tuesday morning talking, and this is actually how I came across this passage. We were talking for a very long time, and then towards the end of our conversation, when he decided to cut me off, this is how I stumbled across this, and he actually said that this was symbolic.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of, because the literal take is dichotomous.
When he said it was symbolic, he said, yes, Jesus' temple, he was speaking symbolically. And this is, I asked him, well, what's it symbolic of? And that's when it was a big oops. Yeah, that just dug a bigger hole. Now it's symbolic of what exactly? That something is dwelling inside of him.
But people can, it's nitpicking. You can pick what parts of the resemblance of something. Like if I want to say, I'm like a cup can be used in many different ways. Now you can nitpick which part of the cup you want to choose to be symbolic of and say, I'm like a cup. You don't have to have all of the attributes of the cup to symbolize a cup. You can just pick this one part. And that's what I think they probably would do. They'll just pick this one part of, the temple's where all the truth of God is. They may not pick the part of the indwelling. They'll just pick the part of the examples and truth of God.
Well, the Jews, when they said the word temple, when anybody said the word temple, a temple had one use. A cup has many uses. You can drink coffee, you could drink orange juice, you could drink water. You could use it to hold a spider. I mean, a cup has many uses in our modern term.
Yeah.
The word temple had one use.
Yeah, I agree.
In the old world, and even today, nobody's using temple any other way than it's a dwelling place of a god.
Yeah, it's not just temple. It's just anything that is a byproduct. It would be a house, a car, a temple, anything that is built because of something that requires a dichotomous function. I have a car because there's people. I have a house because someone's going to be in it. I have a temple because there's something in there, or there's something I want to go experience.
See, you're still playing with the term a little bit too much. A car has many uses. A temple doesn't.
No, I'm saying
a temple has one use, one driver.
There is no such thing as a car by itself. That's what I'm saying. Anything that is a byproduct forces dichotomy. So that's why there's no way a Jehovah's Witness could take this literally.
I know. That's my point. Like, it forces you to have a dichotomous view of
Or you
people.
have to force some kind of subjective symbolism. There is no other way.
So I also brought him to the same author. This was in John chapter 2, verse 21. The same author of Revelation. And John coincidentally says this is a revelation of Jesus Christ. And it's not a revelation from Jesus Christ. It's a revelation of Jesus Christ. Again, the Greek there says of, not from. And then right after he says that, he goes in to describe this Jesus. And he uses the Jewish descriptions of the Jewish temple, the face shining like the strength of the sun. That's exactly what he pulls it from Daniel, but Daniel's actually describing Solomon's temple. John is describing how the Jews described the temple that you can find in Josephus. Josephus describes the temple just like John does. I may be confusing everybody, but simply put, John takes the words, the descriptions that the Jews of his day would use for the Jewish temple that was still standing. And he takes those descriptions and applies it to Jesus. He says Jesus' feet were like pillars of fire. just like the two bronze pillars in front of the temple. The fire and bronze were synonymous in that world. The face of the temple shone like the fullness of the strength of the sun. Again, that's what the Jewish temple did. When the sun would rise, it would reflect off these plates on the temple's face, and you couldn't stare at it. It was so bright. He had the voice of many waters, which they had the sea of bronze, which the priests would bathe in. It was called many waters, or the sea of bronze. The bronze sea, brazen sea, there's many names, but sea of water, the many waters was one of them. He had hair like white wool. According to Josephus, when you look at the Jewish temple on top of the mountain, it was actually white, like white snow, like wool. John takes that and applies it to Jesus' head. So he has eyes of fire, just like the menorah fires in within the temple. John later uses this to describe the lamb that was slain before the throne, which is the mercy seat inside the temple, and his lamb has 7 horns and 7 fiery eyes, which are the 7 horns of the menorah, and the 7 flames of the menorah, which he already told us is the eyes of Christ, the flames. Then later on, at the end of Revelation, John says that there is no temple because God himself is the temple. So you can't make this stuff up. This is all John's writing, just like what we found in John's description here in the Gospel of John. That's John's commentary. Jesus says, destroy this temple and I'll raise it up in 3 days. Then John pauses and he says in verse 21, John says, but Jesus was speaking about the temple of his body. So this is the same author. His whole point is to reveal Jesus. This is a revelation. That was in John. But in Revelation, he's like, now I'm going to reveal Jesus. This is a revelation of Jesus' body as that temple. And again, when you show these kinds of things to the JWs, and you don't have to go into the Revelation stuff, that can get really sticky. Just take into this one verse. This is the only verse you need. How do you explain this? The function of a temple is one function. It's the dwelling place of a God. And in Jewish context, that's Yahweh. So Yahweh, Jesus was making the claim, I am the I am. Yahweh is dwelling within me. This body is a physical temple of the I am. And they still, I've talked to many JWs about this, and they still have no answer. And some of them, the guy on the phone was one of the elders. He was real smart. Like, he knew his history like the back of his head. And he still had no answer for this. He did use the word symbolism, but it still didn't help him. Because what's a symbol? Of course it's symbolic. Jesus knows he's being symbolic. His body is not literally the temple. He's not literally a lamb. He's not literally, Moses or Elijah. He's being symbolic here. He's the temple. What does that mean? What is that symbolic of? Anyway, so that's just another thing. So the first thing is, what do you need Jesus for? The other thing is, why did Jesus claim to be the temple? Those are the 2 things I've found the most productive.
But yeah, those are some good points, and I encourage our audience to talk to him, ask him those questions, ask him about the dichotomous nature, not just about the spiritual essence, but the practicality. Temples, cars, houses, all those things, they're not meant to just be isolatively symbolic. They're only a necessity because something is supposed to be possessing it or dwelling in it. They don't live on its own. And so ask him about the dichotomous functions of this. Even if it's symbolic, it has to still have a dichotomous symbology, because there is no such thing as a house that just exists without something that's supposed to be in it. Houses don't exist to be empty. That's just that's not why they're created. Especially not a house for a God. Yeah, well, like where people are coming to worship and sacrifice at this house to this God for a reason. Well, that's what I'm saying. There's no such thing as a house nobody builds a house so it can be empty. The only reason somebody builds a house is because it's meant to be filled. Nobody builds a car so it could be empty. It's meant to be filled. Mm-hmm. There's a dichotomous function for certain objects. There is no such thing as a house. I'm just going to build a house for no reason. You build a house because it's supposed to be filled. It's the only reason you build a house. And it's the only reason you build a temple is because it's supposed to be filled. And so there is a dichotomous nature to certain things that you cannot isolate. And so that is something that you should ask them. Why does Christ try to, if you're going to present it even as a symbolic function, a dichotomous function, because there is no such thing as a house without people. Nobody's building houses without people. Nobody's building temples without a God.
Well, he could have actually been generic. He could have said anything. He could have said he's anything. He could have said he's a house. And then it would have been generic. It's like, okay, so your house. And everybody would have, the next question would have been, for what? But no, he said he's a temple. Let me rephrase it. He said he's the temple. The temple to Jewish people. Him speaking as a Jew, it only means one thing. He's the temple.
Yeah, I'm not emphasizing on the essence of what it is. I'm emphasizing more on the dichotomous function, because that, I think, is a more theological essence to their nature. Anything dichotomous is an antithesis to Jehovah's Witnesses at all. So anyways, there's a lot of things that we talked about here, a lot of experiences that we expressed. Hopefully it was useful to you guys. And if you're a Jehovah's Witness, I know on our last Jehovah's Witness video, you guys commented. So if you're a Jehovah's Witness and you have answers to any of the things that we talked about, leave them in the comments and maybe we'll make another video addressing some of those comments. But as always, we enjoyed you guys tuning in to another episode of Table Talk TV. Hopefully you guys will tune in next week. But like I said, leave a comment, like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Table Talk TV, signing out.